the first time that I streamed. If I go back on my Instagram, there's very poorly created promo for it. October 10th is officially when Mxiety became a thing.
Now, with something like that, I'm kind of curious because this has been a bit of a topic with some of the things that this class and I have talked about with individual streamers is kind of like this speaking to the void, if you will.
Yes. Yes.
And can you talk a little bit about your first experiences with that?
Well, yeah. So I am also a female presenting, and so the fun part was the first time I streamed, I decided to stream something totally benign because I knew I was going to be streaming in the just chatting category. So I decided to do something totally benign. I was decorating my my house for Halloween. And so I figured, hey, nobody's going to watch this, but I just want to get used to the idea of me talking to myself. So what I did is I got on stream, and I was, this was 2017, so the height of Stranger Things. So I was taping letters to my wall with Christmas lights. And I immediately got two whispers which were very rude and requesting inappropriate things. So that was my first experience with streaming. So I can't say it was the best. The stream that I had after that, I actually asked my husband to join me, and it was the first stream where I introduced myself, again, talking to the void. As far as I know, nobody was there. I think it was a total of 3 viewers, one of which was my phone. And and that stream was a little bit easier because I had another person to bounce off of. And then the first stream that I did myself was absolutely I sat down and I was like, this is my show, this is my stream, this is like an actual show. This is me creating this talk show. And that was very, very nerve-wracking. And people didn't really talk in chat. So in a way, that was freeing, because I don't think I didn't have this pressure or expectation that oh my God, people need to be talking to me. Otherwise, this is not an active conversation that's happening. But so I prepared 2 hours basically worth of a lecture, and I talked for 2 hours about my experience living with depression. And at the time I combined it with something creative, because my idea was, I'm going to have a talk show while I make stuff that makes me feel better. I'm going to have a talk show about mental health. So obviously that has involved significantly, mostly because I figured out a few months in that I'm not good at making stuff. And that's not a bad thing. That's not a thing I say to get pity, oh no, you're really, no, genuinely, I just learned that was not my thing, and I needed to figure out what my thing would be going forward. But yeah, so I think I answered your question and then some.
Well, no, and then some is definitely what I'm looking for here.
Okay,
so,
great, perfect.
Feel free. Yes, exactly. So no, but I mean, I think the big thing is one of the ideas with, especially for a just chatting kind of stream, which has always terrified me per se, because when I do something, I have this as you mentioned, kind of a lecture format where I've got this long list of this is the talking points. How much is it to be prepared about what you're talking about? Because I know other colleagues of mine that just say, I just turn on the camera and go, even for a just chatting.
Yeah.
What has been your experiences for something like that?
So I used to have a lot of anxiety around talking and around having radio silence. So that was why I got prepared. And I've made YouTube videos on this so that's the thing that kind of solved my issue with anxiety of, oh my God, I'm going to have nothing to talk about. Well, you prepare stuff to talk about, and then you have things to talk about. And then no matter what your chat is there for, you already have you have topics. So in my case, they were mental health related. I think in the case of streamers that I've seen that do gaming, talking about current events, talking about your take on current events. I mean, a lot of it is finding your kin. So it's finding the community, finding the people that are going to be interested in your take on stuff. So figuring out what your take is, being open to knowing that like, hey, somebody's going to challenge you in chat and maybe you'll learn something and maybe you'll walk away and being like, you know what, that's not my take anymore. But whatever it is, yeah, being prepared and having talking points was huge for me. Now I definitely will pop on stream with a lot less worth of like a lecture, like like we said, but I still always have talking points. I have like 14 tabs open of stuff that I can always bring the stream over to like, hey, let's talk about this thing now. And as I'm going through just like Twitter feeds and stuff, I have a Google alert that's like depression, anxiety, top articles. So that will come up and I will use that as a topic of discussion. So I have like set places that I will go to so that I always have something to fall back on. Another thing that kind of makes it more awkward is how do you transition from one thing to another? Like if you can tell that your audience isn't into something, moving on to something that they are into, that is something that is just like years of experience is how I've been able to figure that out. But I still stumble through a clumps, like literally yesterday, I stumbled through it where I had an interview and then I was trying to keep everybody back and engaged. And so I'm always in between this, like, do I take charge and say, we're doing this now? Or do I ask the community, hey, what would you guys like to do? And if you've ever asked somebody what would they like to do, most people will say, I don't know, what do you want to do? So it is important to have something to fall back on so that you can take charge. And I said, hey, we're going to go through this article on the Mxiety. And then we had a great time and it spun off into a discussion. And then I flow through with what chat wants to talk about, which is, that's a separate thing as well. As once you have, if you have a stream that is dedicated to a topic, keeping it on topic versus going with what chat wants to talk about, that has definitely been something that I've found challenging. And like, I don't necessarily still struggle with because I feel more confident and I know what I want to talk about. And I also have moderators that will keep me on track. But I'd say the first year, it was just everything. Like you would walk in and the stream would say like talking about bipolar today. And then we would be talking about like literally polar bears, like it would just go so off topic. And I kind of owned that for a while. And I mean, I still do. Like yesterday, we ended up talking about like the most random, because we were talking about characters in TV shows and movies that have anxiety. And so then we kind of spun off talking about those TV shows and stuff. But it was relevant, so I was okay with it. Taking charge and finding a topic has been huge for me, especially when it comes to just chatting. But I've become a lot less rigid about making it like a lecture. Like I used to literally have like 4 pages worth of preparation. And also at the time when I started my stream, I didn't have a 9-to-5 job. So that's just like physically impossible for me now. But I'm very grateful that I had that foundation so that now I have an idea of how things are going to go. So I can start with a few points and then go off of that.
Because I mean, you are partnered with Twitch as well. So
pretty cool.
Which is really cool. Yeah. And yeah. I mean, I know that was something that you did with Mixer, and then you got that through Twitch just recently. So congratulations. That's really, really cool. One thing that I wanted to mention is just as far as the kind of just chatting format of everything, you've got kind of a set idea for how you run your stream. So especially when I watch Wednesday streams, it seems like there is kind of this area of, yes, you do go with the flow, but can you run us through how you plan your particular streams, particularly when you have guests? Because again, it seems like although y'all talk about a lot of stuff, there's still a pretty specific formula in terms of how you do that.
So the hardest part about that has been balancing current events with what I've prepared, because I'm a person that like, I like everything to be prepared and set and kind of in line with an expectation that I create. And then, there something will break in like mental health news wise that I feel like I need to cover that first. So what I do on Tuesdays, especially Tuesdays are interview day. Tuesdays and Wednesdays are interchangeably interview days. But so on Tuesdays we have, basically I give myself an hour to warm up the audience before the interview starts. And in that warm up, I catch them up on what's happening with me. If I have any, like, if there's any plans for the stream, anybody big is coming on that we're interviewing, any like subathons, whatever kind of events that I'm planning. So that's that first hour. And then that segues into the interview. And then after the interview, I try to keep things like fairly light, but still on topic. And so that's pretty kind of open-ended. So Tuesday is when I like to have just like random articles prepared for. Like I have an article right now that's like up about Dr. Disrespect and his how he came out saying that he has extreme anxiety after Twitch banned him and he didn't know where it came from. And since then he's been super anxious. But I didn't get to talk about it yesterday because we went off on this Mxiety article that I pulled up. And people were really invested in that. And so I just kept going. So there's a lot of learning. You can basically, a lot of it is improv, to be honest, because you figure out, hey, this is what I'm going to talk about. And then you have to be ready to pivot. If there's, so in my case, if there's a suicide in the gaming community, a lot of people are going to be coming in. They're going to want to talk about that and how to deal with that and how to prevent these things in the future and what we should be doing. Like, so I will slash everything I'm talking about and we'll focus on that. But when it comes to like general preparing 2 or 3 things is kind of what I have in my pocket, plus any current events, and then the interview. And that's it for Tuesday. Do you want me to go through the other days, or?
It's up to you. I mean, again, I really like this especially in the capacity that we've got multiple students that want to take a podcast approach to things.
Okay, cool.
There are a couple students that want to take this in a having a topic, but it is very much a just chatting kind of stream. But a lot of this will be based on the kind of interaction that they have and that balance between staying on topic with things. Because I know that for me, at least, that's always been kind of a big seller that I've had for the first 4 weeks that I've talked to everybody in class, that I'm just like, you got to be prepared. But that's me. But I also know that my colleague that I work with, that they've already seen, Dr. Ryan Kelly, is very much kind of off the seat of his pants for the most part, which is why I think we work so well together, is because I am the rigid one and he is the one that's a lot more carefree and much more relatable in that capacity. So yeah, no, I mean, if you want to talk about some of your other streams, I think that would be very helpful about maybe even how to look into scheduling some things or create things thematically when it doesn't seem so obvious about how it should be themed.
Yeah, that's actually, I was going to say, I think I'm going to back up and talk about that. So the decision to theme days came to me actually from my Mixer partner manager. Her and I were talking about ways that, hey, how do we continue getting new audience in? And she was talking about the fact that, a lot of people might only watch you once a week. And them knowing, like, one of the comforts of gaming streamers, of most traditional gaming streamers, is that they know I'm going to come here and there's going to be a Dead by Daylight, game. And then we're going to talk about whatever the heck is happening. And that's their expectation on every day. As a just chatting streamer, you don't have that. And the variety is what people are coming for. So 2 things happen. One, I watch the zeitgeist. I watch what's happening again with like Google and with Google alerts and Twitter and all that stuff. And the other thing is I watch what the audience is interested in. So that part comes from a little bit more experience, obviously. So I found on Tuesdays, like having done enough episodes, I found on Tuesdays after interviews, I was kind of just like leaving this pretty decent audience, just dropping them off. And so I needed to find content for them that would be interesting to talk about. So sometimes the interview lends itself to that. Sometimes the interview kind of is self-conclusive and people are done talking about that topic when they're done. So you have to have something prepared. And that will become that becomes evident usually in my preparation for the interview. So great example. Yesterday I had on Dr. Hayes, and I knew that the topic she was talking about, which is gender and gaming, would be very, like, it's very specific to a professional, and people would be asking questions that I cannot answer because I don't have the expertise. So after stream, I know that I probably shouldn't continue trying to pull stuff out of my, for lack of a better word,
it's
right?
okay.
So instead of pulling stuff out of nowhere, it would be better if I switched the topic and completely went on to something that I was comfortable talking about, and that maybe was still mental health related, but was more, you know, not necessarily along the lines of the interview. And then then Wednesdays I put as open topic discussions, because there are certain people I talked to, I polled my audience, I talked to my community. There are certain people who just come by and just want that like brain noodling kind of open topic conversation that's mental health related. And usually a lot of that is informed by current events. But I also have a few topics that I can fall back to after noticing that anytime I talk about this stuff, people are interested. So those are topics like how to care about your, like self-care is a really big topic. How to make friends is a really big topic. So those are things that I know that I can always lean back on and we can revisit. Now, revisiting those while making sure your audience doesn't get bored, that's its own separate thing that I also think comes with a lot of experience. So, you know, you look at chat, you see who's there and who is like, is it a lot of your regulars? Then you probably don't want to bring something up that you've been talking about for, 15 times, and it's better to move on to a new thing. Is it people who you haven't really recognized yet? You can take a poll and ask them, hey, I have a few options. What do you guys want to talk about? The big thing here, I like you also prefer preparedness. So I will, it's usually like on Monday or Tuesday that I will go through and like look through all of my emails and look through Twitter and pull out articles and stuff that I know that I want to talk about. I also am kind of, and I don't think this is a bad quality for a streamer, I'm kind of really, really attached to Twitter. And that kind of, as like not great that is for in terms of mental health, like learning, and there's a separate discussion to be had about learning, to separate and create those boundaries with yourself and social media apps and everything. But that is something that I'm constantly attached to, because that is a lot of where the zeitgeist is for creators. There are Facebook groups, but I find that like I've never really gotten anything out of those but drama, to be completely honest. But Twitter is a constant revolution of news and current events. And so being able to talk about, I'm not a big fan of, and this might be your thing, and that's totally okay, but I'm not a big fan of like, let's spill the tea on what somebody said and let's respond to that. Like, I'm not a big fan of doing that. That's not the kind of talk show that I have, but I am a big fan of, people were talking about, well, actually, like last week, people were talking about, what do you call it? Trigger warnings. And
Oh, yeah.
So let's talk about that. How do you guys feel about trigger warnings? Because I see that is something that's coming up over and over again with streamers and their concerns over trigger warnings. So how do you feel about that? And then being prepared to, I think a huge part of conversation, again, not only is improv, but also going off of what your chat is saying and doing the whole yes and, which is improv 101. So if somebody comes in and says, I think that trigger warnings are stupid, the yes and to that would be, okay, what is your experience with them? So like, tell me what made you have that stance. And then you have a conversation going, and then other people chime in and have that discussion. That is kind of like my ideal talk show. That is my ideal Wednesday format. But you also have to be then prepared that you have to be comfortable with the fact that people are going to disagree with you. and you have to be open-minded with it. So if you're going to be talking current events, whether it's politics, whether it's mental health, whether it's whether it is the tea, you have to be prepared for people to be, to disagree with you, some for the sake of it, and some because they just don't agree with your opinion on it. And you have to be prepared to field that. And I think that improv, being able to back your point, not just, talking out of nowhere, those are critical for what makes my Wednesday format the way it is. And so that's why it feels prepared, and it feels like there is like a connect. It feels connected because I started a discussion. I have 2 more topics in my back pocket in case this discussion doesn't work. But I can then spin off of that discussion by making sure chat feels engaged, by asking them questions that relate to what they've already said to me, and then continuing the discussion that way. And then honestly, Friday is just like, I go on Reddit, and I go on Twitter, I go on Instagram, I go on pretty much anything that will give me some kind of like a current feed of stuff. And I look through and I find cute stuff. And I look through and I feel like, and that's how you get Good News Friday. So I share good news, we share cute, adorable animals and stuff. And that makes Friday, that's what my audience likes. And that is what makes Friday like relaxing and feeling like, leaves people feeling good and ready for the weekend that way. But in the same vein of, I go on Instagram and I look for the hashtag cute. You could go on Instagram and look for the hashtag politics and just see what comes up, and see if something comes up that you think that spurs interest in you, and you feel like you can talk about it for 20 minutes. Because if you feel like you can talk about it for 20 minutes, that means you can get chat engaged to keep talking about it. Yeah. Okay, I think that's it.
Well, no, and I find that really fascinating, especially on the respect of, there's nothing weirder than something going over like a lead balloon,
Right.
and just having your chat just not respond at all to something, especially if you've crafted it. I know things that I've put in that I thought about all day, well prepared, and it just nothing.
Oh yeah, all the time. Literally yesterday, I was so excited to talk about, I had went to a therapy session and I got something out of it, and I was so excited to talk about that. And it was like crickets, like you could hear the crickets. And having those, having not just one, but a few things to rely on was huge, because then I just went, oh, and this is also happening. So let's talk about that. And then that got people interested, and we continued talking.
And that's good as far as that quick movement there. I have to admire so much about your community, because I was on Mxiety's program and just had a blast. And y'all, I mean, seriously, her community was asking questions about my research that I go to academic conferences and not get these same questions. So, I mean, I was really feeding off a lot of that. But I want to go real quick back to a little bit of the void here of, what are some challenges that first-time streamers might face when it comes to this non-community engagement that you feel like they should know about?
I think, and it might sound harsh, but I think if you're going into streaming and you're not prepared to create a community, and you are just there because you just want to play games with people, that's totally fine. But I want you to be honest with yourself, and I want you to, actually, that's it. There's no and. Just be honest with yourself. Is that really why you're there? Because if you are there to, get bigger, I can't even say that with a straight face. But if you are there to make streaming your thing, a community is tied very closely to that. So all of your efforts, all of your creation of your brand, all of that should be tied very closely to what kind of community do you want. And that also will connect you to the niche so if you look at any coach that any streaming coach that you will see on Twitter will talk about, you have to find your niche, I think that's all connected. So what are you interested in? What gets you going? What you can continue talking about for hours and hours? And that will lend itself to then people knowing what they're coming for. And if I know what I'm coming for, then I'm going to come back for that thing. And so to actually go back and answer the question of first time streamers, what do they face? I think it's figuring that out. That is a huge one. So empty chat is empty chat because you haven't, like, nobody knows you're there. Like, unless you do have a previously established audience, like maybe you've made a bunch of memes on Twitter or Instagram and people know who you are and you're now going to send them over to Twitch. That's great. But Twitch itself does not have a good discoverability algorithm. That is notoriously the case. So if you're sitting there with, 0 or 3 viewers and one of them's your phone, that's not because you're terrible and you suck. It's because you need to move up the ranks. And the way to do that is to either have a previously established audience that you bring over, or start creating a space that an audience wants to sit in. So whatever it is that is for you. And that's really, really hard, especially because, like I said, I started out crafting and talking about mental health, and I had no idea where it was going to go. I had no idea that I would end up like doing even Good News Friday 3 years later. Like, that was not on my radar, but constantly approaching it, starting out, constantly approaching it as I'm going to figure this out and I have to be nice to myself while I figure this out is a great way, I think, to start. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think it does. And I want to kind of run with one of the things that you mentioned is as far as brand. And that is a big emphasis for this class because it's kind of in this like weird special topics sort of advertising. I had to kind of fight some people to get this class approved and so forth because, again, a lot of people don't understand what's going on here. And you've done a really, I kind of want to get into your brand a little bit to have students know exactly what you do. And you've done a wonderful job concerning streaming positive messages about mental health advocacy. Can you explain a little bit about that process of developing that message as a brand?
Sure. So I'll be completely honest. I definitely didn't think of it as a brand to begin with. And that was kind of, it took me a little while to understand that I was running a brand. I was running a business, right? If you want customers, so viewers, you have to create a business for them to want to come to. Otherwise, you're just playing video games, and that's okay. But why do you have to do that on a platform where people watch people play video? Like, why, if that's your only purpose, then it's kind of a silly way to go about doing that. But if you are really trying to become like a streamer and you want to be known for what you do, then yes, the brand is huge. And again, I didn't start out knowing I had a brand. I started out with, I think I have a niche. Like, I'm going to do something that nobody's doing right now. And I like went on Twitch and I watched a bunch of streams and I saw what they were doing and kind of got an idea of, okay, this is going to be the feel of it. This is the feel of what communities on Twitch feel like and all of that. So I started out by carving out a space that I thought was needed. And the other piece of it, and this is where it gets like super personal, was the fact that I almost died by suicide in 2015, the first time. And at that time I had told myself that, like, if I ever make it out of this awful headspace, I want to make sure that other people don't feel the way that I do, don't feel uninformed, that they have a place to go where they know the information they're getting is reliable and it is a good balance between people's firsthand stories and reliable expert information. And because I felt like that wasn't there. And so I didn't know it, but I had created my niche that way. And that was my brand. And your story while you started streaming is a great way to start establishing that brand. What gets you streaming? And it could be just like, I want to make friends online. That's totally cool. Make that your mantra. Give people a story that that they can relate to. So why did you want to make friends online? Well, you know, I was actually kind of super lonely, and it was hard for me to find friends. And I thought maybe I would try finding friends through the internet, and here I am. That is a story that's compelling, and that people can relate to, and that will bring people then over to you. But if you just start saying, hey, I'm playing games, come watch, so are 5 million other people, right? So that's not really a brand. But figuring out, why are you doing this? And I literally used to have Post-its all over my desk, and I had a pin board, and it was covered in like reasons why I do this. And I used to start and end stream talking about them as a way to kind of get it through my head and continuously like be focused on that. And also, there are going to be a ton of times where you want to quit. I don't know anybody who's done anything that they love that they haven't wanted to quit at some point. And having those reminders, the people that have those like firm stories that they tell themselves that are, here is why I'm doing what I'm doing, those are the people who stick around. Because all of that stuff of, you know, I'm there for the audience, I'm there because people tell me I'm great at playing this game, like all of that is external validation that drops off fairly quickly. If you can't figure out why am I doing this, why am I continuing to do this, I don't need to be doing this, then you're very likely to not continue doing it, right? It feels pointless. So give yourself a point and a reason, and that's the brand. So starting out with that reason is a great beginning of a brand, in my opinion.
Thank you for that. And honestly, I'm sitting here like I'm going to take some of that advice as well, because I'm, again, the person that has 800 tabs up on his computer in this case. What I want to shift gears a little bit here. What are some tools outside of stream to make yourself more visible away from that live content that you're doing? Because I mean, we talked about building audiences, and most everybody here, with very few exceptions, would say, I don't have an audience to bring in, and I don't know how to bring those people in. You know, one of the things that could be found, and I'm curious as to your opinion, is that outside of your live stream, how important that is, and what are some methods that you've done in order to foster that?
So somebody made a really good pie chart, like the amount of time you spend live streaming versus bringing people to your live stream. Like that pie chart is like, it's like maybe 20% of you is actually creating the content and live streaming. Everything else is all the stuff you do to bring people to that content. Because again, Twitch has really bad discoverability. So if you don't have a way to bring your audience in, they're not going to be able to find you. And how do they find you? You give them a compelling story, and then you tell that story across everywhere and anywhere where you can find people. It's basically the equivalent of like driving to different towns, standing in the middle of the square and yelling, hey guys, I'm going to do this tonight, you all should come by because it's going to be really cool, and then going to the next town and yelling that. And that's Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, whatever it is. So whatever that message is, getting people to follow that message is what's going to then bring people ultimately, you know, to your stream in this case. So figuring out, there is a way to figure out, once you've figured out your brand and once you've figured out what you need, it's great to go then and figure out, once you've figured out your brand and you've figured out, you know, why people would want to come watch you. Like that's a very simple question that you can ask yourself. And if you can't answer it, it's time to dig a little bit, right? Why would people come watch me over somebody else? If you have a distinct answer to that, spread that exact thing around everywhere, right? So you're going to go into the Times Square and you're going to go into the public square and you're going to say, hey, watch me because nobody else knows how to play the flute while they play Mario Party 4. And like, that's what I do.
I would watch that stream.
I would watch that stream. So like, so that's what I do. And then you go to YouTube and you go, hey, here is how I learned how to play Mario Party 4 using the flute. And you create that content. And then you go to Twitter and you go, hey, people like Mario Party, do you want to know how to play it by using the flute? this is how you do that, and make a Twitter thread out of it. So creating specific content, like creating a brand then establishes like a kind of a circle, and out of that circle you have the spikes that go out to all different areas, and then they all come back into your brand. That makes sense.
Yeah, and that is kind of interesting, especially of how much this has been talked about with some of the colleagues I've worked with, of how can we get people involved with, how can audiences formulate that message and be part of the creative process.
Yeah.
It's at least it seems like extremely imperative to be able to do.
Sorry.
No, that's okay.
Just thought of it. There are also pieces that are important. I think I started out very much with the idea that I am going to give people stuff and hopefully they like it. And the people who like it are the ones that are going to stop by. But there is a lot to be said about giving people stuff in the matter that they will digest easier, right? So if you, let's say, somebody who says, I don't think mental health is a real thing. And believe me, there's plenty of people who do that, unfortunately, like still. It blows my mind every time, but I've heard it. So I can't come up to that person and be like, you should come talk about mental health, because they're not sold on the idea. They don't think it's a real thing. So they're not going to come by and want to talk about mental health. But if I come to them and say, hey, you want to look at a bunch of cute kittens on Fridays and like prepare for the weekend by feeling better? They're like, oh, yeah, okay. And then I start talking during stream and I'm like, hey, depression is like real. This is how I felt. And this is, you know, a discussion about that. They might be watching and slowly kind of be converted because they now have, instead of just shoving it in their face and saying, you have to do this, they are going through the kind of the metamorphosis of wanting to learn more about it. And then maybe they're not, maybe they're like, oh, now she's talking about depression, I don't think that's real, and they walk away. But either way, you can, finding a way, understanding that it's not just your brand and what you have to offer to people, but understanding that there are certain ways that people digest that information, and figuring out how to best bring that, figuring out how to best bring people outside of the niche that you've already created is huge. So it's figuring out how to speak other people's language, to bring them so they can speak in your language.
That is probably one of the most difficult things of being a professor, especially because I'm sitting here going, like, as soon as you started talking about, all I could think was, oh, that sounds like social judgment theory and going through persuasion and the latitude of rejection. And I'm like, yeah, nobody's going to understand that because I'm a colossal nerd, and that's the way my brain is wired.
Right. If you talk about it in your nerd speak, people are like, okay, I don't get it. But your goal is to get people who don't speak that nerd to come and you know and to be in your stream. So you have to find a way to speak their language. Yeah, absolutely.
That's great. No, I mean, again, I always get amped up when we have these conversations. Now, I don't want to take over the entire time here. So, and I want to be respectful to Mxiety's time as well. But if there's any questions that y'all have, this is a good opportunity, because y'all are about to go live. And let me actually, if that's okay with you, Mxiety, if you don't mind fielding a couple questions, because y'all are about to go live, and this is a good opportunity to talk to somebody who is partnered and runs a tremendous stream. So if y'all have any questions, this is a good time to do it.
I'm all about questions.
We've got one on chat right now. Sorry.
Okay.
Let's see.
Do you want me to read it? I can just.
Sure. Yeah, by all means.
Okay. Do you have any challenges with setting up your Twitch stream, or do you have any advice for a good setup for those doing more chatty style streams? Is it better to be more simple with the setup? I am super fancy now, as you could tell. I got the RGBs, and I have a DSLR, and I have like that. It was all literally bought within the past 4 months. I started out with a decent camera. And in terms of setup, you need a decent camera, and you need decent audio, especially if you're doing just chatting. a lot is riding on people being able to hear you and hear you well. So it's really important that, you don't need to go out and buy a $300 mic. That's absolutely silly. But you can go, if you are going to start with investing in something as part of your setup, definitely audio, because your product is audio, right? Your product is people listening to you talking. So you want to invest in audio and make sure it's good. Then after that, it's anything visual. Otherwise, like everything else, the stream decks, the fancy lighting, all of that is very much like third and fourth priority. But I don't think you need to, no, I don't think it's smart to start out by throwing a bunch of money into it, because I've seen it actually go both ways. I've seen somebody who started their stream with all the top equipment, but then they had no idea what their brand was. And so they just kind of came on, and then I bought some of their equipment because they ended up selling it off because they were like, oh, well, I didn't make it. But they didn't have anything that they were making to make it with. So that was its own thing. And then, and then I've seen people who start out with all the best equipment and they like take a run for it. So there's not like a definitive, but definitely simpler overall. Like you don't need a green screen. Keeping stuff not cluttered in the background is best. So I have like what I call organized clutter, right? So it's stuff that you can look at, but it's not stuff that's like jumping out at you. Like it's not like a dirty, like if there was like a messy bed behind Dr. Daniel, I'd probably be like, oh, why is this bed on me? Like that's distracting. But looking and being like, oh, she likes Kermit. Oh, she has a Twitch pillow. Like that's very in line with what I talk about and in line with like my Disney nerdiness, and it makes sense, and it moves over to the audience very well. But if you can literally start with you in front of like nothing behind you, that is your best bet. And if you can't have nothing behind you, then investing in a green screen and putting like a plainish background is your second next bet. I think that's it. Okay. Okay. When you have guests on, how important is it that you have good audio equipment? I'll be doing Zoom interviews with people for my streams. Yeah, again, like going back to it, super, super important. But not so important. Like I didn't get a Go XLR until last month. And the Go XLR is like a really, really fancy switchboard for all of your audio stuff. But this is an AT2020 mic that costs $100 that was an investment a few months after I started, because I was using a Snowball that my husband used. So he used to use it for work. Then I would unplug it, plug it into my computer, and go from there. And it was a pretty decent mic, but the difference that it made when I set up my mic was huge. And again, your product is people talking to you and listening to you, right? So whether they're lurking, whether they're watching you, it's the sound is your product. That's the thing that you're making, is your voice needs to be able to go through all the wires and then come out the other side in a way that is pleasing to others. Otherwise, no matter what your message is, how am I supposed to listen to it if it's not in great shape? So audio quality is huge. Also try to control as much as you can about your audio quality, because that will, because sometimes your guest doesn't have the best audio quality and there's very little you can do about that. Not all guests come with like great setups and mics and all that. Some of them are like literally using their microphone laptops. I have somebody who's like a brilliant counselor, but she did the entire interview from an iPad from this angle. So it's like her up chin, and it's it's not great. It's not great, but I can't control that. And the audience will give you kind of, like a little bit of like, that's fair game, because they know like there's only so much you can do. I'm not going to like buy her a mic and send it to her. But if your audio quality is good, then you can kind of make sure then you have that room for your audience to be like, yeah, okay, I get it. They can't control the guests, but I can hear them and I can hear what they're talking about. And that's really important. You love okay. So Hannah, thank you so much. I'm very glad that you know that is Tangled. It makes my heart smile. When I moved into my house that I'm living in recently, and the community got together and decided to buy that for me. It's an Etsy print. And Tangled is really, really big, and Be the Light stems off of that, and like it has a lot of importance to me. So yes, that wasn't a question, but I gave you a mile-long answer. Okay. Okay, so I meant the guests you bring onto the show and their audio equipment, not yourself. So again, you can't really control.
You answered that at the end. I'm
okay,
sorry about
okay,
that.
okay. All right. Oh my God, Tangled is my favorite Disney movie as well. Yeah, so there you go. There's a ton of little Tangled stuff. So no, you can't see it. I have a. Oh, you can see it.
I noticed in your Baby Yoda and your Sailor Moon.
Yeah.
At the bottom there. So that's I do like that as far as like conversation points, because I was on a live stream not too terribly long ago that somebody had this like wall of Funkos.
Oh yeah.
And that is like a small obsession of mine. I love collecting Funkos, and so when I saw that, I'm like, oh, this is the greatest background I have ever seen. I want to talk about every single one of them.
But Funkos are also great because they have a uniform look. So it doesn't look messy. Like, you know, my stuffed animals are kind of all different, and there's a few Funkos thrown in there. So that is kind of still, in my opinion, a little bit more of a messy aesthetic versus like nice, clean boxes that all have a similar looking figurine in them. Like, that's why I think a lot of people do Funkos in their background, because it's not too much, but it is a variety of stuff. So when you're looking at stuff, it's not distracting, but it's clean. Yeah.
Other questions?
Yes. Other questions. I clearly, after 3 years, I have learned to accept the fact that I talk a lot, and it's only gotten worse because
This is perfect.
Yeah. So if you guys have any other questions, I'm so happy to answer them. I'm trying to think. Yeah, I think I answered everything about the sound, and that's big. Lighting is pretty important, but not really. Also, watch what other people are doing. So when I started, green screens were huge, and having something on your green screen that like drew the audience in. Like one of my good friends, her green screen was a graveyard with bats flying through it. So it was pretty plain, but still like intriguing. Like, and you're immediately, you go into that, and you're like, oh, this is a goth themed, horror themed kind of stream. Cool. And then I had a green screen background that had like specks of dust and like this light coming through it. And I personally think it looks terrible, but at the time it was what all the cool kids are doing, so that's what I did. But yeah, so watch other people's. It's just like, how do you become a good writer? You read a bunch. How do you become a good streamer? You watch other people's streams and see what they're doing, and if it's working for them and not, and learn from that. How do you deal with people being rude and insensitive? Oh my God, that's a big one. Wow, I wish that was asked earlier. So a few things. This is the thing when I come onto people's streams, this is the thing, and talk shows, this is the thing that they ask me about the most often. Is a few things. One, people are being rude, insensitive. If you go back and watch my early streams, I literally would cut portions out where I would start crying because trolls would come in and say insensitive things about mental health. And I'd be like, I can't believe you believe that. And I like broke down in tears. And then I would repost that to YouTube and cut down that part and be like, this is when trolls were here. Like I had little slide that I would put in and be like, trolls were here. Okay. And then the rest of the show. But so understanding that people who are rude and insensitive are 99% of the time there to see what you'll do if they'll be rude and insensitive. And so it's not like, the approach that I used to take was kind of talking back to them and trying to talk them out of it. And I have found that they're usually gone by the time that you try to do that. And it's a waste of your breath. But, the thing that I have been doing recently is considering, why is somebody coming in and being rude and insensitive? So like somebody comes in and says, this is a common one. I have a big nose. So people will come in and be like, wow, you got a big nose. I'm like, okay. I went through a phase where I played off of it and I was like, oh my God, really? Wow. I never noticed. Oh my God. Thank you for telling me. So I went through that. And my thing right now is, wow, that's the best you got. So if you want to be part of this community, in this community, we talk about XYZ. And so you're very welcome to try a new phrase when you come in. So I understand, like, you're coming in, it's really weird. I don't know what to say, right? I'm new to this community. How do I start? I don't just want to say, how are you? Because everybody asks, how are you? So if I'm coming in with malintent, I might say, you have a big nose. If I'm coming in with good intent, I might be like, hi, everyone. How are you? So understanding that that's where people are coming in from, and then responding to that. So my response now is, cool, why don't you try again? And most of the time trolls are like, oh, this is no fun, and they'll leave. But you might get occasionally somebody that you convert into a viewer who's like, oh yeah, okay, well, I didn't mean that. I actually really wanted to talk about mental health. So, okay, so let me try that again. I have depression, anxiety. So I have found, just putting yourself in the shoes of that person a little bit and assuming the best. But that is a big, like, I can have a whole lecture just separately on that. I know you're primarily a just chatting streamer. What kind of recommendations do you have for those who are planning on playing video games while streaming to help differentiate their content from others? Find a thing that makes people want to come to your stream, right? That's not what everybody else is doing. So, like, I have a friend, her whole theme is she's a camp counselor. So her whole theme for her stream is that you're coming in and this is camp time. And so you're about to, like, tell horror stories around the campfire. And that's really cute. And that's a differentiation. And that lets people know that's the kind of feel that you're going for. You're going for the feel of campfire. So when I come in, oh, we probably just want to, whatever, just talk about whatever here. And that's totally okay. Then I have, I know somebody who used to talk politics over video games. Now he only does talking politics, but he used to talk politics over video games. So that was the thing that people went into his stream for. And it wasn't that he just talked politics. He made it a differentiation that he was a leftist with left leaning that talks about politics. And then eventually people, like, he kind of figured out, oh, I don't need to continue playing a game. But to answer your question, figure out what could you talk about for hours? What could you really be into and talk about for hours? And then start that thing as potentially as your niche. And then that's your jam. Maybe if you're doing Mario Maker levels, you can talk about all the other people in the community who do Mario Maker levels. So sorting out, like, why do you want to do this and what can you talk about for hours? Great places to start. And the differentiation overall, yeah, again, just watch a bunch of people's streams, see what they're doing and see what you can do differently. Are you really into Disney? That's a great niche. Are you really into specifically Tron? That's a great niche to start. Like, I am really into Tron and I talk about it while I play Tron. Like, I don't know. So maybe you're really into horror and you want to talk about death and dying while you play Dead by Daylight. And it doesn't have to be even themed like that, but, like, yeah, find a really, I don't know if this is the best advice, but a really good place that I've found that people have started is, what were you made fun of as a kid, like, relentlessly? That was your thing that everybody thought was so stupid that you did, that you were, like, obsessed with trains as a kid. There are probably a bunch of people out there who are, like, really freaking love trains just like you do. And they're waiting for somebody to talk about trains while you play Dead by Daylight. You don't know. So start with a thing that you were really, really into, but really never got its time in the sun. Oh, Megan, thank you. That's so sweet.
Yeah, that's a good point to be making, as far as, like, the whole idea of kind of model trains in that capacity. Because yeah, and now I'm, like, gonna try to implement some of that in there, because I've got some odd hobbies that I think might be kind of fun to incorporate. Yeah, that's interesting.
But it's a start. Yeah, I started out as talking about Disney, like, all the time, because I could talk about Disney for hours. And then I was like, well, I really want to talk about mental health. So I'm going to talk about Disney, but mostly mental health. And then you, like, move that over back and forth. Yeah.
Yeah, because you've been doing a lot of Samurai Jack recently as well, and incorporating that into how you established yourself not only as a mental health streamer, but also kind of as a fan of that particular series.
Well, ask yourself, why are you super into, like, for Samurai Jack, I was like, why do I like this show so much? And I was like, oh, it's actually because there's a ton of mental health themes. So I kind of explored those themes, and then I was able to talk about them. Yeah, so ask yourself not just like what you're into, but why you're into it.
Absolutely.
And yeah, those are all great topics to start.
Other questions? Again, I want to make sure we're courteous to Mxiety's time.
This was awesome. Thank you for letting me talk at you. I know I'm talking just like there's a really great podcast called People Who Talk to Themselves, and it's about mental health and streaming, and I highly recommend it. And it's basically about the fact that, like, yeah, you talk at a camera and you happen to help people.
No, but I really like, again, how you've done this with your stream in particular, of bringing people in and making people feel welcome. You know, having several friends of mine who are Twitch partnered, and they do their best to keep up with chat as best they can. But I know every time that I've come in, you've been super welcoming and like actually mentioned me by name in that first hour. And I think that's such a good way to start a stream, because yeah, you're going to be a little bit more engaged with the guest as you're going through that particular hour. But that first hour is just so critical. And again, warming people up to the stream is just, again, I really enjoy the way that you do that. So
try the hint I have there is try to act as though nobody has ever been. These people have never been in your stream before, even if it's a bunch of your regulars. Assume that, because your regulars have all said hi and stuff, so assume that everybody else watching has never been in your stream before, and start your stream by restating your purpose, by welcoming everybody in individually who, you know, spent their time and was, if they're there when you start stream, that meant they made an effort to be like, okay, Mxiety starts at 6 p.m. Eastern. I know that, so I have to be there at 6 p.m. Eastern. So that's why I try to thank everybody. But yeah, the assumption is everybody who's come in here has never watched this before, and why should they continue watching me for the next 3 hours? And go with that.
So I can't resist. So talk to the lurkers.
Talk to the lurkers, but don't call them out. Dear Lord. There's okay. Can I just do like really quick Twitch etiquette 101? I maybe if you guys know this, I'm sorry if I'm talking at you, but please don't come into anybody's stream and say, "Hey, I'm gonna go start streaming." That's very rude. You don't need to say goodbye. You can say goodbye, but you really don't have to. Don't come in talking about what you stream about unless the streamer asks you, because it's basically like, the way you have to think about it when you enter somebody's stream is like going into somebody's house, right? Are you going to walk in and be like, hey, I got a better party over here? Like, that's not cool, right? But you can come in and be like, hey, my name is so-and-so. And then people start asking you about stuff. And then you're like, oh yeah. And I also have my own party that I go to every whatever nights, you know, that makes sense. And that's not considered just like rude self-promotion. But yeah, those are huge. And the lurkers are there because they just want to watch. It's like the equivalent of if somebody, you know, is watching TV and suddenly like the person on screen comes out and is like, thanks Mxiety for watching right now. And you're like, well, no, I don't, I just wanted to watch this movie, man. So if somebody wants to talk, that's awesome. But if they have not made themselves, you know, they have not introduced themselves to discussion, they just want to be there to watch. So make a comfortable environment for them to just watch.
Yeah, that's a good point, especially for how many people I've talked to that say, yeah, they're just watching on their PlayStation, so they're not typing at all. So and how many people are just absolutely terrified,
right?
Because, you know, just being an extreme introvert, it's like, I'm a lurker for a reason. It's because I don't want to be called out, and you know, especially being part of a community that's all that's already established, it could just be so overwhelming.
Right. Listen, I'm an extrovert and I still walk into communities going, hi, can I, is it okay?
May I stand here?
Yeah. I'm just going to be over here. Thanks though. I wanted to say hi. Yeah.
I am going to put a link to your Twitch.
Thank you.
So again, I highly encourage people to watch the stream. Obviously, any guests coming into our class, please be respectful. They are an extension of myself, and but at the same time, this has been a blast, and
Yay!
I hope that everybody has gotten something out of this. I know I have personally, but this again, as we're going live next week. Yeah, this has just been awesome. And is there anything as far as like people reaching you or anything kind of last words you want to mention to the class here?
Yeah. Start by being nice to everyone, like everyone all the time. When you start streaming, just be nice to everyone, and that will, I swear, that will get you far. That's first thing. Then in terms of reaching me, mxiety.com. I'm always on Twitter, like unfortunately I said before. So that's a great place to find me. Next week we have the games hotline coming on, which is really cool. So if you want to learn about them, check them out. And then I actually have Dr. Kelly coming on Wednesday. So
oh, do you really?
Yeah. It's all.
Oh, that's right. He's doing resilience. That's going to be great.
Yeah. So streaming is like a very small, tight circle, and then it's also like, yeah, it feels big, but it's actually like very small and neat. Once you find your niche, there's like a good amount of people that you know in that niche. But yeah, so then that's that Wednesday, and then it's gonna be Good News Friday this Friday. So see you there.
And I will do a shameless self-promotion. We're also doing a PAX panel next Saturday.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes, please.
That is about what it's called Not Your Therapist, and talking about community streams, asking for mental health advice, and what you can and can't say, which I think is extremely important. And I will put a link for everybody to watch that, because the people that we got on that are phenomenal.
So good.
And gave a lot of great insight. And afterwards, we're going to have a live stream where we do a Q&A. So I believe that's next Saturday. It'll be late, especially for us East Coasters, but
so it's not this Saturday coming up, it's the Saturday after that.
The following. So yeah, PAX is running 24 hours a day for 10 days.
Wild.
I don't know how they're going to pull that off, but they are. But I think we've got something really special, and it's having people who are experienced streamers and mental health advocates and professionals. It's just going to be, it was a good time, and really I think it'll be very, very, very helpful.
Yeah, and it's a lot more helpful than you think, because a lot of people, when they're trying to establish their community, they end up getting like really close to people and trying to help as many people as possible, which is cool and super sweet, but it's definitely a pitfall to look out for, because you'll overextend yourself, and now you have 100 people watching and you can't give yourself to all of them at once. So that balance is super important. So I highly recommend, if you're starting out streaming, to watch the PAX panel and learn how to establish those boundaries for sure.
Absolutely. So, well, thank you so much for joining us. Again, if y'all have any questions, please feel free to reach out. And again, make sure that you're remembering your assignments upcoming for budget summary. I will look to grade everything on Friday so that y'all have that in your inbox as well. But at the same time, keep me in the loop for your streams. If you're having any issues, I want to make sure that I'm there for that. Yeah, be able to help out as much as I can. So, yeah, I hope y'all have a good weekend. And again, thank you, Mxiety.
Thank you.
Thank you.